Claire, how are you? Lovely to have you on Just Get a Real Job tonight. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Appreciated.
Oh, not at all. Thank you for asking me. I'm glad to be here.
It's a pleasure. Well, we are using Zoom to record this, which I haven't used in many, many months. So this is a bit of a throwback, but we're persevering with the tech issues we had before, so it's all going to be worth
Yeah,
it.
my tech issues. I'm happy to admit that.
In fairness, we were very like there was no drama. We just quickly dealt with it very fast. We
Mhm.
adapted, and here we are. But Claire, let's just kick things off. What is the Glasgow TV Festival? We'll get to know you as well as we go into this episode, but let's just go straight into this because that's what a lot of people on socials and stuff will be knowing you for at the moment because that is the big thing that's happening.
It is. It is. It's a huge thing. It's a brilliantly exciting thing. The response from the industry so far has just been absolutely incredible. Even better than I could have ever imagined. I genuinely thought I might get a little bit of, well, what's this? This is new. I'm not sure about this sort of pushback, but everyone has just been so incredibly generous and excited and adventurous about it all, which just goes to tell me how badly it's needed. So the Glasgow Telly Festival is a festival, but a festival with a bit of a difference. It's kind of the beginning of a revolution, I think. So I think the industry's been broken for a really long time, and the everything that's happened over the past few years with the economic crisis and with COVID and with the strikes and all the rest of it have just really shone a spotlight into some issues that have been happening for decades, really. And I started thinking about I've been thinking about it on and off for years and years and years. Like this cannot be. I feel like we're it's almost a Stockholm syndrome a little bit in the industry where we all talk about how this isn't working and it's not working for anyone. And I don't think it works for audiences as much as it doesn't work for us either. So we all kind of talk about it and then we continue sending our scripts out and sending our show reels out and just doing what you do because there isn't really an alternative. And so for the past kind of couple of years now, it's been feeling more and more urgent to me to be like, there needs to be an alternative, and there is an alternative. And when I kind of came up with what I think is the solution, I feel like I'm being a little bit cryptic. I will explain what I'm saying, but when I came up with what I think is maybe the solution to kind of move things forward and to kind of return to the roots of what telly was always supposed to be, but doing so in a really like kind of 21st century digital sort of way, I was like, we need to launch it with a bang. Because I think something that the industry, and it's a little bit related to that kind of like Stockholm syndrome that I was talking about, we're very bad at or good at, I'm not sure quite sure what the term is, sort of anytime there's something a little bit new and different, we maybe try one little thing and then we go, oh, that didn't work, it's fine, we'll just carry on with we've always done things. So I really wanted to make it really clear this wasn't just about one new project in a different or kind of innovative sort of way, but it was actually a whole new system for launching loads and loads of projects. And it is, yeah, a little bit of a beginning of a revolution. And so I thought a festival is what we should do. So here we are.
Very, very. There's lots to unpack in that, and I came to the launch event of your
Mhm.
festival a few weeks ago to have a wee nosy and really just get this interview really. But it was interesting to be there and to sort of hear about it and stuff. And there's lots I want to ask you about it and stuff. But what I think is interesting, you're saying that we've been talking about the industry not working for what feels like a long time because done a lot on this podcast recently about the ongoing crisis facing freelancers and TV, particularly. I think it's interesting to talk about why it's not working for audiences as well, because often I've been coming at it from the perspective of working in it. And
Mhm.
yeah, no, it's interesting. And I think sometimes I've thought to myself, like, are we talking about this too much without having solutions? So I think it's interesting that you're trying to like be like, okay, as well as talk about it, which I think is vital as well. How can we fix
Mhm.
it? Mhm.
Exactly. I think that's exactly what kind of spurred me a little bit into action because I feel as though these conversations, they've been kind of growing and growing in volume for several years. I mean, and really, to be honest, as long as I've been in the industry, which is a really long time, I left film school in 2002, so very nearly 25, a quarter of a century ago, and we've been talking about how things don't really work ever since then. I think in 2007 it was like a stock market crash. I won't go into the details. I don't really know what
Mhm.
happened, and the BBC lost a load of funding, and sort of development just kind of disappeared. and it hasn't really ever properly come back. So that's what my maths isn't good enough, but that's the best part of 20 years that we've all been going, oh, we're heading for a crisis. Oh, we need to invest in new talent, and we need to invest in established talent as well. And we need better stories, and we need to keep up with, when I remember when Netflix
Hmm.
came along, we were all a bit like, oh, we'll just pretend it's not happening. And then we kind of couldn't anymore. So then we just started sort of papering over the cracks and trying to put the same types of series that had worked on like an episodic weekly basis onto streaming, and then binging became a thing. And yeah, so I just feel like we've been papering over cracks and talking about, oh, it's not working, it's not working, it's not working for such a long time. And of course, those conversations have been getting louder and louder for, I think, particularly the past year, like with this the commissioning freeze, which of course is affecting, I'm very much
Mm.
scripted, but unscripted as well. I mean, that was announced September, I think, 23. So a good year and a half ago. And we're still talking about the problem. And I do agree with you that we need to keep talking about the problem. We need to really identify what the problem is. But also, we need to make work, and we need to do work. And we need to also, yeah, think about what a solution is. And I think sitting around waiting for the kind of the powers that be to come up with a solution, it's never going to work. It's never worked for any kind of revolution. It's not going to work for this one either.
Mm. No, it's really interesting. I think, especially at a time where, the latest Back to survey was 56% of our industry aren't
Mm-hmm.
working and stuff. Like, as you say, we need to try and adapt, find ways to maybe work or create work and stuff as well, on
Well,
our own terms.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because the thing that really frustrates me about it is that audience appetite has never gone away. Like, it's something that has bothered me about the industry again for a quarter of a century, that I don't know anyone that doesn't watch telly or doesn't watch films or doesn't, play games or, consume entertainment in some way or other. It's a pretty universal human experience,
Mm.
right? And yet we're all like, but there's no money to do anything. I'm like, well, how can there possibly not be? I can understand how, where there's arts that I do think it's really important to support, like for the government to support and so on, and that may not always have such a commercial appeal. They still need to be part of our culture and our society, and so I totally agree with that. But when it comes to telly, I'm like, it should be a thriving business. We have pretty much the majority of humans on earth is our market, and yet we're all like, it's a crisis, there's no work, there's no money. And I'm like, that doesn't add up. Where is all, there has to be money, and where is it going? And I think that's what I mean about the system's broken. I don't think, I don't blame commissioners, I don't blame producers, I don't blame, everyone's just trying to do their jobs the best they can, and trying to work within. But yeah, the system, it is the financial side of it, which isn't my area of expertise, but it is hopelessly, ridiculously bloated. And so there's an efficiency that's missing there. And again, it goes back to the Stockholm syndrome thing, where we're all like, oh, it's terrible, we don't have the budget to do anything. And yet we'll just do the same budget to do the same things again and again, and we'll just be really confused when that still doesn't work in another year or 5 years or 10 years.
Mm. I think we did a big industry live panel a couple of weeks ago about the problems facing the TV industry, and I think a lot of what we talked about, and Philip Ralph is a brilliant sort of voice on the ongoing crisis in TV and stuff, talked about some solutions
Mm-hmm.
and ways around it. And I think one of the things he said was that there's not enough innovation at the moment. It's completely what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of stuck on that. Things aren't working, but we're still doing the same thing. And it's like the Einstein thing of like,
Mm-hmm.
definite doing the same thing again and again and getting the same result. It's mad, and there is money. It's just that it's
Mm-hmm.
being used to make certain types of shows, and the mid-tier shows and the lower budget shows,
Mm-hmm.
as a result of that, have either died or just aren't able to sustain themselves in the way we do things now. So I think it's really interesting to speak to people like yourself who are trying to think of innovative ways of making TV and making art and stuff in a way that's different. But also,
Mm-hmm.
what's interesting, I want to talk to you about as well, is the old studio system. Some of your idea isn't actually different; it's actually going back to the roots of it, as well as doing
Ex-
something innovative. Yeah.
exactly. And in a way, that's quite necessary, because that's when there was innovation. And that's one of the things I love about the everything that we're doing with the Glasgow TV Festival, and like every time that I've explained the concept to someone, they've been like, "Oh, that's a bit like," or "That's a bit like." None of this is reinventing the wheel. It is all stuff that does exist, and it has existed for over a century, quite a lot of it. And that feels really right to me as well, because nothing's invented wholesale, and I think sometimes that's part of this sticking with how things have always been done, because it's almost like, well, the alternative is to just throw everything away and do something that has never been done before, and that's terrifying, and I'm like, no, it doesn't have to be. We have roots, because I think the thing I always go back to, and I know it sounds a little bit cheesy, is humans have been telling stories and listening to stories for hundreds of thousands of years, and fundamentally that hasn't really changed. Yes, we've had also an oral tradition, and then that became theatre, and then it became radio and film, and so the medium has changed, but fundamentally storytelling hasn't changed. And that's kind of what I mean when I say that the audiences haven't changed. It is true that audiences aren't watching like terrestrial linear TV in the way that they once were. But they're still consuming stories. People who sit scrolling through TikTok, what grabs their attention is a story. It's a character. And yes, it might be a real person. Sometimes it's not a real person, or it's a real person who is still performing their own story. I was talking to somebody a little while ago who was saying that his kids don't watch TV anymore. And he's like, I find that really, really, sorry, my fringe is on me. That's there we go. And he was like, I find that so sad that they don't watch TV the way that my generation did. But then he said they're addicted to the Sidemen. I don't know if you know them. They're like this sort of YouTube phenomenon. I think they were like gamers to start with. It's this group of friends that started streaming games, and now they've become this like incredible phenomenon. They do sort of like, I think, sort of jackass type challenge, and they've got podcasts and so on. And he was like, but they just watch that. They don't watch TV. And I was like, the Sidemen is a soap opera. The Sidemen, it's all about the thing that keeps kids watching them gaming and talking about their lives and going on travel adventures and all the different shows that they do. It's their characters, and it's their friendship, and it's watching them grow up, and they went from like skinny teenage boys to they've all got kind of girlfriends and babies, and I think one of them left at one point. And it's the same stuff that makes my mum watch Coronation Street. It's the same stuff that makes me watch Melrose Place. It's the same stuff that had people coming back to the cinema in, the teens, the 19 teens, to watch what's her name's flown out my head, Gloria Swanson, every single week in different short films. It's fundamentally storytelling, and I think that when we ignore that and we get really focused on the medium or the format, we're missing the point of telling stories, which is I guess is what I'm all about. I think that's what we should, get back to.
And can you explain the sort of old studio system in the barns and stuff? Because you're taking that concept into the TV festival and what you want to do with it, right?
Exactly. Yep. So I'm a huge old Hollywood obsessive. I always have been. And I one of the things I love about it, sorry, I've just realized I asked a completely different question.
No, it was interesting
But
still. It's useful stuff.
I do tend to go off in tangents about this because there's so much to it, and I'm very passionate about all of it. So yeah, no, just feel free to kind of steer me in the right direction. But so when Hollywood started, and so many people talk about old Hollywood, they talk about like the studio system and the golden age, like the 30s and 40s, and I'm like, no, 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 that's practically new Hollywood as far as I'm concerned. I'm fascinated with the noughties, or whatever it was called then, the 1900s and the teens, which is basically when they just invented what screen storytelling was. So they started off with so initially moving cameras. It was just the excitement of seeing movement. So you would just see people like jumping up and down or dancing or climbing a tree or something like that. And then it was actually a French female filmmaker called Alice Guy Blanchet, whose husband was into Amdram, and she wanted to film like him and his friends doing plays. So then it was very much like, like when parents film like a school play. So you just had the one shot and the actors sort of moving around. And then by the time the Hollywood studios started being founded, and one of the things I love about that period is that there was literally nothing in Hollywood. There was a few farms, and that was it. So when the studios founded, like they had to put in like running water and sanitation systems and all that kind of thing. And that's a whole fascinating aspect of it as well. But anyway, they all kind of like they got there and they were a bit like, right, so what do we do with this? What's this medium going to be? A lot of them had come from vaudeville, so not even really like sort of straight theatre, but vaudeville. A lot of that is about just making things up and, oh, does that make the audience laugh? Great, let's do it again, and so on. So there's a lot of kind of like improv as they create vaudeville shows and even on stage as well, because it's all about like what's funny, what's entertaining, and that was a lot of the early filmmakers who became the early filmmakers. So they would all be sitting around in these, barns that they had taken over from an old ranch. And there's great, like, there's memoirs that literally talk about how, like, the smell of horse shit was everywhere, because the horses had literally been moved out and the filmmakers came in, and they basically brainstormed. They talked about stories. They came up with original stories, and they came up with novels and newspapers for like real life stories or plays or whatever. And whenever they thought they might have something, they kind of would grab a couple of them. They didn't even really have a sort of writer, director, actor, producer yet. It was just a bunch of people who would do whatever was necessary to make a film, which incidentally is one of the reasons that a lot of the early female filmmakers don't have the credits that they deserve, because a lot of them were producing and directing. But when credits were starting to get formalized, maybe sort of 10 or 15 years later, it was typically men that were doing that, and we just sort of assume that, oh, she was probably just the actress, or she was just the writing was actually seen as a female, as a more of a woman's work at the time. That's a little tangent, but anyway, when they thought they might have something, they grabbed a few of them and they went outside and they grabbed maybe a cowboy off the street and they improvised a camera, and they were literally like, okay, so the beginning of the story is this, and this is how we're going to do it. And hold on a minute, if we get a little bit close up and we can actually see the actors' expressions, then that feels a bit more intimate. And oh yeah, okay, let's call that a close up. And so they were just literally figuring out as they went, seeing what things looked like and what they felt like. And okay, it's getting a little bit boring. Let's have an explosion come in now, and what have you. And as soon as they kind of got to a point that they had a sort of the beginnings of a story, it usually be like a one reel, which is about 12 minutes. So basically a short. They would take that directly to audience. So there was these little, what would eventually become cinemas, but again, were basically barns with like a sheet strung up at the front. There was actually one in particular that was a sheet, it was just strung across like two tenement buildings, and then in the middle, and they would project to just whoever was like walking by or whoever was around, and they would stand at the back and they would watch as people like laughed or gasped or get bored and started talking or left or whatever it was, and they took note of these reactions. That's literally where the term cut to the chase comes from. They saw people getting bored
Mm.
and went, oh, let's cut straight to the chase so that they don't get bored next time. So depending on the reaction, they would take it back to the studio and they might recut it, or they might reimagine it altogether, put the character in a different story, or if it worked, they might then develop it into a feature or whatever it was. The point is that they were always, everything was on its feet. Nobody was sort of sitting with a story flat on a page for like years on end and hearing theoretical feedback from people who may have very informed opinions, but it's still fundamentally opinion. It was really, really active, and it was really audience facing, I guess. And it was all trial and error, and nobody was getting married to scenes that they had been writing for months and months and months and months. They were just like, does that work? No, great. Yep. So, and theatre works a little, like theatre rehearsal works a little bit like that, or it should do. Anyway, but generally in the film industry, in this or the century since, we've just got further and further away from audiences, and I think that's a really big thing that
Mm.
has contributed to this crisis, because when you have a development system that is fundamentally based on a tiny group of people being able to psychically predict what audiences might like in, let's face it, 3 to 5 years, it's, of course, they're risk averse. Why would you not be risk averse? Guesswork is nothing and it's terrifying. And these people want to keep their jobs as much as the rest of us do. So I think that the solution is to go back to the way that these old Hollywood filmmakers worked, and to get things up on their feet at a much, much earlier stage, where it's a tiny risk. We're talking about a few £100s to grab an actor and a camera and just see if you have something and see if audiences might get excited about it. That's what's going to kind of break things open and sort of, it's not about throwing the traditional development process out completely, because of course it has so much value, but it's not enough in its own. It needs to be underpinned with a lot more action, I think.
I think I mean, I worked in development for two or so years, and I still sort of kind of do some of that as a script editor now and stuff, and I've got loads of thoughts on it, and it's really interesting to hear because we are guessing. Like, obviously, I've been taught, I've learned how to look out for a
Hmm.
good script, but fundamentally, at the end of the day, that is objectively just my opinion. I have a completely
Exactly.
different taste to you, probably. We could both read a script, both think one was amazing and one was shite,
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily. I mean, there's things you can always look out for in a script, but like at the end of the day, it is kind of guesswork. And like, I love the people I work with in development. There's loads of talented people, but it is quite a removed system as well. It's quite a hidden way it works. Like no one sees it. Like it's very
Exactly.
disconnected. It can all sometimes feel quite disconnected from audiences as well. I know they do like tester screenings, but often that's they'd already shot something. And unless it's like a film where they
Hmm.
have millions of pounds, like we're gonna go and reshoot half this film. That does not happen very often. It's usually more like, right, we'll edit this scene slightly so it's 2 minutes less, or you know what I mean? So this is a
Hmm.
like this is sort of starting almost at ground level, grassroots. So it's you're almost saying to the commission as well, well, it'll be less risk averse for you because we're
Hmm.
gathering evidence now. Um,
Well, exactly.
so it's
You know, that is
interesting.
the whole idea, because I too have worked in development. I was a reader for years and years, and I've been in development as a writer as well. And there are times that you always want to be really receptive to notes, and I've had some incredible notes in my career that I've been sitting there going, oh my gosh,
Mm,
yes, why didn't I think of this? This is brilliant. But other times they're like, oh, you're going to need to change this and that, and I'm like, I don't think so. So checkmate. And then you're going to get stuck in this ridiculous sort of um,
mm,
theoretical academic discussion about what may be the better thing, when the reality is there's no objective right and wrong at all. There's
mm,
what audiences might respond to or what there's not. And like one of the things I learned, so I actually trained first as a director for theatre before I started writing. And it was drummed into me again and again and again by so many like directors that I worked for as an assistant, that if an actor ever comes to you and says, how about, can I try this bit of business in the next scene? Or can I say the line like this? Or whatever it is, you never discuss it with them in theory. You always are like, show it to me. Let me see what it looks like. You tell me what it feels like. Let's see how it affects the energy of the scene. Because fundamentally, it doesn't matter whether I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. That might be interesting. We don't know. Who knows? It has to get on its feet. And again, I don't think it's a question of taking away. I think that the traditional development process should work alongside this and should just be, it's almost like putting, I don't know, concrete
mm.
foundations under the development process rather than
Yeah.
so that it's always based on something. Because the thing is as well, if you put a project out, at a really early stage in this way that, again, we're being cryptic again, but I will explain what it is in a sec. But if you start having a project and you're getting audience feedback all along, no one's saying you have to go, no one's saying you have to be dictated by it. It's about being informed by what audiences seem to be responding to. And you can always still make the creative decision to override them on certain aspects. But again, you've got the information to make that decision with, rather than just debating it back and forth in this really kind of sort of flimsy,
Mm.
pointless way almost.
Do you think as well it might help avoid some of the class and sort of issues around access to the arts, and especially in TV development? Because if you've not been trained or you don't have the money for final draft and you can't write a script
Mm-hmm.
in a way that formats into an industry standard, or you've not been taught how to do it because it is a very specific thing. And I think we often get groupthinked into this idea that, well, this script has the wrong formatting, so we're just going to throw that one out, or they don't have an
Mm-hmm.
agent, so we're not looking at that. I suppose like by making it cheaper almost, or making it more you can try things out. You might see someone's talent in a different way as well, which is much easier to spot when you're not just reading a bit of paper sometimes, I feel.
Exactly. And I think that's a hugely, hugely important part of it, that there are so many people that are excluded from the industry because it costs a lot of money to, whether it's go to film school or even do, a part-time course at any of the film schools. Or there's so many schemes and things out there, but so many of them cost. It's almost got to a point where it's pay to play, I think.
Yeah.
Or even I actually had this debate with it was like a script doctor, I think they're called. It was somebody in the States, so I know that's a slightly different system. But he was talking about how, oh, you never ever, he was tweeting, I think, or not tweeting, Blue Sky, obviously not Twitter anymore, but some Blue
Mm.
Sky, he was talking about how, oh, never ever send a script out that isn't industry ready. And I was kind of going, so what you're saying is, for anyone to send a script into the industry, they need to pay you a few $100s first. Like, that's that's not right. And it used to be
Hmm.
like way back when I first started, again, this is in the mid 2000s, most of the production companies would give you a reasonable amount of feedback, you know, when you sent in even a call, if there was a read request. If they read your script, they would then, you know, you would get like an email with a couple of paragraphs of feedback. And it really shocked me actually when I put the first call for submissions out for this project that I'm doing. And every single person, I was like, that's just a thing that I'm going to do. Hopefully, there's not insane amounts. There was quite a few submissions. And I did just make a commitment that I would give them each at least a few lines to give them an idea of why I had turned it down, and maybe a couple of things to think about for the next draft. And I got so many emails back going, oh my God, this is the first time anyone has like told me anything about my writing. And thank you. So, and like to me, that just seems like the bare minimum. So if that's gone away, if that's what you don't get from production companies anymore, then the only way you're getting any feedback, and I know we're talking specifically about writing, but it does apply to actors and to directors to a large extent as well. Um, then it has become pay to play. You have to go on a course or pay a script editor or a script doctor or whatever. And I think that is so fundamentally wrong. And this is what I mean about this system not serving audiences, because they are
Hmm.
missing out on some great stories from people who do not have the wherewithal to get into the industry as it is right now. And that's even before we get into all of the, you know, working for free and not getting paid for options anymore. And, you know, I'm just talking about getting yourself industry
Hmm.
ready. So the concept that I am working with, my solution, that sounds really ominous for some reason, but I think we need to use social media. I think it's a massively underused resource for any kind of storytelling. As I mentioned earlier, I think that social media fundamentally runs on storytelling, and so it is an absolutely just natural forum for drama, and nobody seems to be using it for drama that I have found. And there's little bits and pieces here and there, but like as a real kind of movement. So for the Glasgow TV Festival, I'm looking for as many 1 minute pilots as I can possibly get hold of, from people at every level of the industry. I'm like, you could have BAFTAs coming out your ears, or you could be just getting started. Do a 1 minute pilot in a social media format. And I think that's really important because what we often, you know, we do get self-funded pilots and short films and all that kind of thing. And I think the tricky thing is that when something looks as though it should be a fully funded drama production, if it's in that format, but it doesn't cost that money, subconsciously it kind of looks like it very often. And so audiences, so people who are out with the industry, will just kind of flick past without really paying attention to what it is. So I think it's really important to make it feel organically as though it belongs on Reels or TikTok or YouTube or whatever it is. Basically, essentially using the format like The Office used the fly in the wall format. So it's not about catfishing anyone; it's about just sort of using that format. And I think it's a really important thing that the call is just for a 1 minute pilot, nothing more. It shouldn't cost you any money other than if you want to buy the actor a pint afterwards. You can use it with your own phone. If you want to use more kit, if you've got more kit, I'm not going to tell you not to do it, but I want it to be like as low a barrier to entry
Hmm.
as possible. And I'm really trying to kind of reach out to people who have stories in them, who love telly, who've got telly in them, who maybe they're not able to write a full script and go through all the schemes and the unpaid internships and all the rest of it. But maybe they've got something brilliant that they could just put together on their phone with a pal or by themselves. And yeah, so I think that's a really important part of it for me.
Mm. And the festival's sort of running for 4 days, right? But as part of it, you're basically you've called like every pub in Glasgow you can, basically, right? And you're gonna be
Yep,
showing these 1 minute films or
exactly.
clips or whatever you'd call them.
Yeah,
Pilots, that's the word,
episodes.
pilots, yes.
Pilots. Yeah, the 1 minute
Hmm.
pilots I'm calling. So the idea is that it is, and it's a pilot in the original sense. A pilot kind of like morphed to become the first episode at some point in the last few decades, which it can be, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It used to be that sometimes you used to be able to do like an episode in the middle, and it was just to show off the potential of what your idea might be. And that's kind of what this is. It's take a so one thing that's really important as well, is I think there's lots of opportunities for like arty farty stuff. It's not my personal cup of tea. This is about big, bold, ambitious commercial dramas. I want stuff that you could see on HBO or Netflix or Sky or whatever. So you take a big, massive idea. It could be any genre that you can think of, any tone, the kind of thing that would, if you were to shoot an entire episode at a full drama production, would be millions of pounds. And distill it down into a 1 minute, or sort of, I'll say, I'll accept up to 90 seconds if you really have something cool. Um, in a TikTok format. So it could be a person just talking to the camera about what's going on with them. They could be doing something at the time, or they could just be talking. It could be like a day in the life vlog of I don't know, a spy or a soldier, or it could be somebody, I don't know, like secretly filming a confrontation or something they're going past in the street. So anything, any of the kind of content that you could see on TikTok, which is kind of anything. And yeah, all about distilling it down into 1 minute. And then, yeah, we're going to guerrilla screen them. Because a big part of what's really important to me about the festival is that it's a kind of people's festival, and I want it to draw in audiences who love telly, who it would never enter their heads to go to a short film screening, because they're just like, well, what's that? I don't know what that is. It's nothing to do with me. Or who would feel intimidated by like a red carpet premiere or whatever. This is like a gritty Glasgow, down to earth sort of festival. So I love the idea of taking these stories to audiences where they are, and where they're going to be on the Saturday afternoon is in the pub. So I have been speaking to loads of pubs. I am continuing to speak to more. So if anyone knows of any pubs that have a screen, just the screens where you would normally see the football or whatever, who might be open to screening a bunch of these pilots throughout the festival. It'll be over the 4 days. And then the ideas, we're going to have a website that people will be able to like scan a QR code if they're like, oh, that character is interesting, I want to hear more from that character. So we'll also get like a little bit of, again, it's not really feedback, it's sort of, it's response, I suppose, as people are saying, oh, that was interesting to me, or they might completely ignore it, or whatever in between, which I think is
Mm.
hopefully it's going to be really exciting. We might, yeah, we'll see. Well, obviously we won't put it on during any football games because we don't want to start any fights. But hopefully, I don't know. Is there football still on in May? Can't even tell you.
The last weekend might be
Last weekend of
actually
May.
not a lot. There'll be a few things
Oh,
probably. There you
well, we could do it at halftime. Be fine.
go. There you go. No, and there's also lots of other events you're putting on throughout this festival as well. And just while people are watching, listening to this podcast, there's links to all the TV festival stuff, all Claire's social media stuff's all below. So, click the links if you want to find out more, if you want to find out where to submit, or just you want to, find out more about Claire and her work, etc. Click below just now. But yeah, do you have the dates for the festival as well? Just want to,
Yep, it's going to run from the 29th of May until the 1st of June. So the 29th is a Thursday evening we're going to start, and then the Sunday afternoon will be the sort of finale gala closing event. She says
right,
gala.
and people can get involved if they don't live in Glasgow, further away as well. Are you taking submissions from everywhere?
Yep. So the submissions will be primarily Scottish, but of course that can mean anything. Whether you live here, you're from here, you've got a connection. But you don't have to be physically in Glasgow, certainly. And even if you're an audience member not physically in Glasgow, everything's going to be streamed live, most likely to YouTube. So you'll also be able to join into the whole thing,
Right.
whether you're far away or just can't leave your house, whatever it is, you'll still be able to join in.
Very exciting, very exciting. I want to sort of ask as well, because obviously this podcast is all about creative careers. Had a very interesting career. You're doing interesting things and stuff. I want to know a bit about you and stuff for the listeners. So obviously a writer, you'd worked in different things, well, casting, producing. You'd studied abroad as well. You were at film school in Vancouver or something. I was reading.
Yep.
You've done a
Yep.
lot of things.
I have, yeah. I've actually come to realize over the last few weeks that I've had this very weird, checkered career with day jobs and jobs in the industry, and then jobs doing what I didn't think I wanted to do. And I've come to realize that it has very uniquely qualified me and nobody else to do this festival, and possibly nothing else. Because yeah, so I actually grew up abroad. I'm from Glasgow originally, but my dad's job moved us to France and then the States. I went to France when I was 8, and then 10 for the States. And spent most of my teenage years, and then finally London, where my family are actually all still based. And then, yeah, as an adult, I went to Vancouver for film school, and then Stockholm. And I just went there because I was bored, didn't really want to live in London anymore. And I was reading The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So yeah, I kind of I think for a long, at the beginning of my career, so I went to Lambda first. I wanted to study. I started to be a theatre director. That's what I kind of wanted to do then. And then I worked in a whole bunch of, I pretty much scattergunned a sort of empty CV at pretty much every pub theatre in London. And I did that, worked in various sort of stage management and assistant directing and things like that for about a year and a half. And then very randomly got a job in development at the Orange Tree Theatre in Richmond, where ironically enough, my parents now live. And I was like, I worked here 20 years ago. And it was just script reading. And I read scripts and then I, took any ones that were potentially promising to, the theatre directors. And that is what I think at that point, I was like, I think I might want to write. I think there was something about the scripts. I was in a lot of rehearsals at the time, either as some kind of
Mm.
assistant stage management or as an assistant director. And I found it really fascinating watching what actors needed from scripts. That might sound weird, but I loved listening to, those conversations that happen in rehearsals
Mm.
where someone's like, I'm not quite sure how to play this. Like it doesn't quite, it doesn't make sense to me. And I need, what do you think the writer was thinking here and here? And the director would be sort of speculating and sort of just watching all of the various, exercises and things. And it really interested me, that idea of writing something for other people to create from. And then when I had this first job, just sitting reading scripts, and that was the big thing I was always looking for was, an interesting story and all of that. But it was also, are there characters that are worthy of someone else putting their talent into? Like that was always like my really big thing. And so it was around then. Do you know the honest truth of how I ended up in Vancouver Film School was I also had a day job as a receptionist at this post-production facility in Soho. I would just answer the phones and give people coffee and things like that as they came in. And because I think it was on Dean Street or something like that in Soho. And quite often, if there's tickets available for like press shows for West End plays, they'll just go around and try and like fill up the audience in the afternoon. So these couple of guys had come in and said, look, does anyone want to come see this play tonight? We've got a few tickets, we just to fill the audience. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come. So I went along, and it turned out the play starred Jason Priestley, who you might actually be too young to know who he is, but he was in this show called Beverly Hills 90210 when I was like 11, when I was in the States.
Mm.
And he was like my first love, or my second love after Jason Donovan and Neighbours, to be totally honest. So he'd been like my guy throughout all my teenage years, and he was in this play. And during in the interval, I went to the bathroom and overheard a woman like washing her hands, the next sink, talk to her friend about how blah blah blah, because he's Canadian, he's from Toronto. And I just jumped in and went, oh, he's from Vancouver, actually, because I'd had like the Jason Priestley story, or I had read everything, and this was long before the internet, so it wasn't even like I could Google him. I actually like bought magazines and books about him, and I happen to know he's from Vancouver. He went to Ladner High School, and they were like, oh no, I think it's Toronto. And I was like, it's Vancouver. And it got a little bit heated to the point that like theatre security came in and told us to leave.
Whoa. Whoa.
She'd had a drink, to be fair. I actually hadn't, but I just wasn't going to, I should have just
You were
given up
so
and let.
passionate. You were like, I just know this is a fact.
Exactly. I was so passionate about it. And I was, yeah, so it all got quite heated and we had to leave, and I never saw the second half. So I still don't know how that play ends. But
Oh
the
my God.
next day at work, I remember just being so like raging, but then also thinking, oh my God, what if I got that wrong? Like she was so stubborn. And so I went on the then newfangled internet, and I was terrified because I thought I might get in trouble. I'd only used it to email like messages, like phone messages to people. And I didn't like, they didn't even have Google yet. I don't even remember what the Ask Jeeves or something. Anyway, I went on and I finally managed to search, where does Jason Priestley come from? And it came up bizarrely with the like list of search results, confirmed he's from Vancouver. And then there was a thing about the Vancouver Film School, and they happened to be accepting applications for the
Whoa.
very first writing for film and TV program. And I applied that evening, and I moved to Vancouver 2 months later.
Whoa. That's such an interesting origin story. There you go.
It's
An
so
obsession
ridiculous.
with
Yeah,
Jason Priestley. There you go. It opened all these doors. So thank you, Jason, there,
totally.
whatever.
Well, exactly. And do you know something? But 10 years later, he read a feature that I was putting together that I'd
Whoa.
written. And we wanted him to attach for like the male lead. And honestly, like, I still have the email from his agent saying, "Well, Jason read your script over the weekend and really enjoyed it." And I was like, right, my career's over. That's
Right,
the
I'm going to frame
pinnacle.
this now. Yeah.
Totally. I don't need anything else. I mean, the film never happened in the end. We could get the financing, but I was like, I don't care. Jason read my script.
Whoa.
That's all. That's all I need to happen. It's fine.
Mm. And then from there, you sort of done, you're an author as well. You'd written lots of things. I mean, it's hard to get into somebody's entire career in a 1 hour podcast episode,
No,
but it's interesting to get a bit of an overview.
oh, totally. Especially when I tell a 20-minute story for every single question.
Not at all.
But yeah, no, super briefly. So I went off to Vancouver for a year, and then they have a program in Canada where if you, or they did then, I don't know if they still do, where if you study in a certain top like subject, you can then get a visa to essentially do work experience in the same sort of subject area, like kind of continuing your studies. So I got to work in Vancouver, which was great because that was, I don't know if I don't think it is still quite to the same extent, but it was like they called it the Hollywood of the North at the time. And like X-Files was shooting and Supernatural was shooting and Battlestar Galactica and like all these like huge big American series. So I got to go and I would do like a week or two here and there in production offices or casting, did quite a lot of, standing outside sets with a high vis vest, waving, actors into, actors' cars into the set or the location or what have you. So that was really, really good fun. And then my visa ran out and I ended up back in London. And then I kind of continued doing the same thing. I knew by then, because I guess I trained in the American system, I knew I wanted to be a showrunner, which is going to, I guess, a writer producer over here. So I knew that I needed a bit of a production background as well as like developing my own scripts. Of course, we don't have, and we still don't really.
Mm.
Some people will say there's writers' rooms. I know they exist, but we don't
Not
have yet.
really. We run them out of production companies like for certain projects mostly, but they're not really a standard thing still because they cost. Well,
No.
I'm not saying that's not a reason not to do them, but they see them as a cost. So yeah.
They do. Exactly. And either way, and you're right, they're on a project by project basis, which is fine and great. And maybe it's a start. But what they have in the US, it's a whole system where you can leave film school and you can get your first job as a writer's assistant. And then you can work your way up various rooms. And then by the time you get to a point of like pitching your own stuff, you can have, 5, 7, 10 years of experience in a writer's room. And then you're qualified to run your own writer's room. And we do not have anything like that system. Even if you've been in one or two, you're still just kind of making it up. But so I kind of was like, well, I'm going to have to sort of invent that for myself. And so again, I just sent my like still fairly empty CV to every single production company in London. And just a few of them go back to me and said, yeah, you can come and do this for 6 weeks, or you can come and do that. And that was how, again, I ended up working in like production offices as a sort of general PA on set. And I did quite a lot of casting. I got into there's this casting assistant bank where again you just sort of sign up, and if a casting director needs extra help for a big project for however long, you go along. It's like temping basically. So did millions and millions of all of that while at the same time writing, and I got my first agent and was like shortlisted for the BBC Writers Academy, which in those days was just all about the soaps. And I remember sitting there going, like, this is great, except I don't really watch any of the BBC soaps. And so I don't know how, are you saying that I can't get into the industry unless because they kept on talking about how you had to have a really genuine passion for Casualty or EastEnders or whatever. And I was like, well, but if I don't, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them at all, I just didn't happen to watch them. And it felt like, it felt like a little bit of a sort of a door closed kind of thing. And that was when I got fed up with London, and I randomly bought a one-way ticket to Stockholm, which turned out to be a really, really good move because that was around the time of the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo film. So there was loads of American interest. I was it's a weird reason to move to a country if you've. I was reading The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and I was like, looks like a really cool place. So bought a one-way ticket. And because those films had done quite well internationally, all of a sudden there was quite a lot of American production companies that were interested in Swedish projects. So I managed to work for quite a few years, like translating pitch decks and writing the English dialogue and being a sort of semi-translator, which I wouldn't say it was anything like writer's room experience, but it was a really good experience working with other people's writing. And I sort of took on a bit of a development role where I was like, okay, that character isn't really going to translate to an American audience or vice versa, which it was fantastic experience. But then I had a whole bunch of projects set up at different production companies and big production companies that, you know, if you've seen anything Scandi Noirs or whatever, you will you will see things that they've made. So I remember thinking, right, this is it. I've been working in the industry for like 12 years at this point. I've done a million bits and pieces. I've been all my different specs and so on, and this is going to go. And in the space of, I think it was about a week and a half, every single one of the projects just fell apart for like no reason, the way that they always do. I think two didn't get commission, and then one, the producer lost the job, and then a production company then got bought over, and everything fell out. And I just remember having this moment of like, I can't, I can't do this. I can't. And for months, I would cycle past one of the production companies, giving them the finger. And I remember thinking when I realized I don't like the person that the film industry is turning me into. And so then I went and got a job as a daycare teacher in Stockholm. And that's when I wrote my first novel.
Oh, no, it's interesting. No, it's good. You've done like so many different places and stuff as well. What I want to take away from that, and something I wanted to ask you when I had you on tonight as well, is you've always been somebody that's kind of been a go-getter, and even with this TV festival, you like decided at Christmas you're going to put it on, and you're doing it in May, so you just make things happen. That's not always easy for people. I mean, I'm trying to become that person. I think I've been hard on myself.
Mm-hmm.
I've managed to do this podcast for nearly 5 years, like we're in the fifth year anyway. It's not quite there yet, but do you know what I mean? It's like making things happen, but like that's not always easy for a lot of creative people. You're also quite
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurial, especially the way that you're putting on the TV festival and stuff. Do you think naturally creative people often aren't entrepreneurial enough, or it's a skill we don't lean on? Because I do think having a business mind, I'm trying to teach myself that, or having a more of a
Mm-hmm.
selling yourself into things, it is a skill and stuff. What do you make of that? As do you think creative people need that more, or it's underused?
Do you know, in a way, I don't think it should be necessary because I think, you know, as you say, this is something that's natural to me. It's just the way my brain works, and it's something I enjoy. I love going out and pitching to people and getting people excited about things, and you know, putting things together, and so that works for me. So I should definitely do it. But I actually, again, I think it goes back to this broken system that we're asking so many people in the industry right now, creative people particularly,
Hmm.
to do things that are not their areas of expertise. And I actually, and I don't mean to say that people shouldn't stretch themselves and explore different areas of expertise, because sometimes you don't know if you're good at something until you try it. So you absolutely, definitely, I think, should always do that. But at the same time, you know, it's things like, see, when I started, there was no, I didn't have to write pitch decks, or even, you know, you do an out, to me, outlines and treatments should be like a writing tool. It's how I explore and I build the story. The idea of having to write all of this like promotional material, I'm like, that's a totally different skill. And that's, producers should really do that, or people in the production company should be doing that. And we put it more and more in writers. And this is kind of sort of my whole thing, where you could have an incredible idea for a TV series, but if you don't have a marketing brain to be able to write these incredible pitch decks, we might never get to see that series. And I think that is really wrong. So as I say, I don't want to come across like I am encouraging people not to bother, not to get out their comfort zone, or not to like try different things, because you absolutely should. But also the system that I'm trying to build, that I'm starting with the festival, is that I think we should try and get back to people doing what they are really good at. And for a lot of creatives, that is being creative. And there should be a system, there should be a business around them. And that is like kind of getting into sort of the old studio system. Obviously, there's a lot that was wrong with the old studio system. I'm talking about the 30s and 40s in Hollywood. But there was a lot that kind of worked about it, that there was this business around creatives, and creatives were told to be creative because that's what we're good at. And so yes and no, I guess, is my answer really. That I think that getting out your comfort zone and trying all the stuff is always is worthwhile as a creative or as anything. But really, I think the actual answer is that we need to rebuild the business and the systems in a way that allow creative people to do what they're really good at.
No, that's a really interesting answer because I suppose the fact that we have to be so hustle, that work all the time and stretch yourself is that we're being
Mm-hmm.
pragmatic in the system we're in, but it isn't actually sustainable because like it's fucking exhausting. Like I don't, you were
Totally.
having to self-start a lot of things, and I enjoy that as well. I mean, there's a balance to it. As I say,
Mm-hmm.
it's cool building stuff. It's cool like thinking outside the box and coming up with solutions and trying to like make things happen. That's fun, but that also doesn't work for everyone, as you say. Like I have lots of friends who are more
Mhm.
introverted or quite shy, and like they just aren't able to
Mm.
sell themselves
Oh,
because
sorry.
it's not their skill set. So they're actually excluded from the industry because of that. Like I feel like everything I've been able
Mhm.
to do in my career, I mean, the majority of that's probably only come from that extra hustle work, as opposed to like my
Exactly.
actual talent or my actual like ability. Not putting
Mhm.
myself down, I do have that as well, but like I think I've had to do that to even get where I am, and that's not even necessarily secure either. So it's I feel for people that don't have those, aren't able to
Mhm.
do that because they don't have the confidence or the skills or whatever. It's kind of
I
bullshit to be
totally
honest.
agree. And you know, again, you know, to some extent, you know, that applies to every industry, that the people who are really good at job interviews are going to get hired more than the people who are
Yeah.
maybe amazing at doing the job. So yeah, there to some extent, it's like, okay, that's just kind of life. But I do think it's got to an extreme in the industry where you
Mm,
know, people are doing like five, it's even things like obviously it's moving away from the topic of writing, but I think self-tapes are horrifying, because every actor I know is having to invest a lot of their own time into directing themselves, into lighting themselves, into editing themselves, none of which are actually skills that you need as an actor. And it's just
mm,
absolute it's become, again, it's because there isn't the same money in casting that there used to be, because there isn't the same money in everything. And so now they're like, well, you just do it. And actors do it because they're not going to get seen otherwise. They've got no choice. So again, it's going back to that enforced Stockholm syndrome, where we all just do what you need to do to get into the industry or to get given parts once you're in the industry, or jobs or whatever. But if you're really bad at editing, or if you are, you know, you get these like 1 page or 2 pages with no context whatsoever, and you don't just so happen to deliver the line the way the director has randomly imagined the character might deliver the line, when they've given you no direction whatsoever, you're not getting parts, and you could be incredible.
mm.
And so that absolutely drives me nuts. Again, as a former casting assistant, I'm like, yeah, I would see the end of self tapes. I think it's just an awful system, and I rant about it quite a lot. And the same applies to, you know, again, directors shouldn't have to self fund entire shorts in order to get anywhere, when funding is not their area of expertise. And you know, again, that goes back to the class thing. Some people have got parents who'll give them a few grand to, you know, get started with a short. Some people do not have that background, and so will never get to see their talent. And you know, again, it goes back to this thing that I feel as though, yes, the industry isn't working for those of us who are in it, and that is absolutely, you know, jobs and training and getting a new generation of talent is a hugely important thing. But also, for an industry to function, we need to be, you know, concerned with the output as well. We need to be, are we serving our, you know, market? I know that sounds a bit too businessy, but our market, which is the audience. And I don't think we are. I don't think we're giving them the stories that we could be giving them, and we don't think we're giving them the stories that they actually want. I think they want much more interesting stories than all too many commissioners give them credit for, and that's why, you know, when I say the Glasgow TV Festival is about starting a revolution, it's it's fixing all of that, and it's about fundamentally changing all of these inequalities that are just not only bad from a fairness point of view, which is hugely important, but also just inefficient, and it's not even good business. You know what I mean? It's not working for anyone on any level whatsoever. And so it has to be changed, and it's all starting now in Glasgow.
No, it's really exciting and stuff. Just to sort of expand that as well, like talking about revenue streams and how they're like, do you think we are fail like the TV industry is also failing as a business as well? Do you think we could do more? What things could we do as a business to make more money for the TV industry? Like, what could they do? What do you think?
So efficiency of systems is a huge part of it. I do think that budgets are absurdly bloated at the moment. Like I can remember when I started getting excited about the thought of a pilot, that an episode that was 500 grand. You'd be like, oh my God, that's so much money. You couldn't do anything for that. And of course that's economic to a certain extent. But there's so many other bits that aren't necessary. So to me, just streamlining and keeping things really efficient, keeping things, because the story is all that matters. The story is all audiences ever care about. The other thing is, though, it's also just moving with the times a little bit, and drama in particular is so bad for that. You know, drama It pretended that streaming wasn't happening for so many years. When like music, I'm
Mm.
not saying that they've responded to like Spotify and so on particularly well, but it did kind of respond, and it did start sort of like working with them a little bit. And we just sort of pretended that streaming wasn't happening for a long, long time. And now we're pretending that linear advertising is still a viable business model, and it's not, and it hasn't been for probably quite some time. Like, I don't know about
And
you,
that's
but I
actually
haven't.
partly what's caused the downturn in a lot of terrestrial channels and stuff at the moment. That's why a lot of,
Mm,
partly why Channel 4 have had to sack like what 20% of their workforce. So,
exactly. And why they then had to have a commission increase for, I think it's just started up again, so well over a year.
mm,
Exactly. So that is, and I think that is actually a much stronger model than subscriptions. The problem with subscriptions is that it's finite. Eventually, everyone who's going to subscribe to Netflix
mhm.
is, and then they have no more money, and which is kind of what's
And
already
and the
happening.
other thing as well is they then have to go to the ad model anyway. So you're subscribing to watch something with adverts. Well, you used to just watch
Exactly.
anyway. So you're doing both.
Exactly.
Mm,
Exactly. And the thing is, like brands and stories have gone together have, hand in hand again since the very, very beginning of Hollywood. People were working with brands to finance films from the teens onwards. Obviously, soap operas, the term comes about because it was like Fairy Liquid that financed the first few, I don't know if it's Fairy, but like an American version of like detergents and stuff. And so that was a really early form of branded content. So it was basically none of the stories were necessarily about anyone. It wasn't like product placement. No one was necessarily doing stories about detergent. It was stories that appealed to housewives who would buy detergent. So that I think is one of the most exciting like kind of growth areas, and unscripted have been really good at jumping on that. And there's so many, like JD Sports have a whole YouTube channel that's now a massive part of like their business. It's so successful. So there's loads of unscripted and factual content that are kind of jumping on that. And again, drama is still going, oh no, 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 we want traditional commissions and tariffs and whatnot. And I'm like, yeah, but there aren't any tariffs anymore. No one's got any money to give you a tariff. So so pretending that there's something anti-creative or being snobbish about working together with brands who, let's face it, it's a natural fit. They want to get to the general public, so do we. We should be working together. So I think that's a revenue model that is massively, massively underused at the moment, and that's it's going to have to change because there is no other money.
that's really interesting. It's good to talk about. I've only got a few more questions before you and then we'll start to wrap things up. But one of them is, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in your career? Obviously, you had a very wide-ranging career, so I'm interested on your answer for this.
Oh, that's such a good question. Probably the biggest lesson, and it's a kind of general life lesson, and it's a bit cheesy, is probably to trust my gut. I spent a lot of time in my 20s and my first few years, I whether it was taking notes that I knew were going to fundamentally change or ruin my story, but a producer told me, so I thought they knew better. And so I went and I changed it, and then they were like, oh no, I don't like it anymore. And I'd be like, no, I know, because you're not changed it. Or even just second guessing myself when it came to applying for certain things or going in certain directions. And that's against probably something I've learned in general life, that I'm not saying I'm always right, but I think I am always right for me, and I know what the way forward is for me. And I'm so kind of like learning to trust that and just to go with it and to trust that it'll work. Also, I probably actually the other, and it's kind of the other side of the same thing, is also that it's not that big a deal if you fail. Like it's really not, like as much as, obviously I think I hopefully made clear I'm
Mm,
hugely passionate about TV and storytelling, and I think it's massively important. But you know what? If a couple of the events at the Glasgow TV Festival audiences hate the scripts, nobody will die. It will be fine. We will rewrite them, or we'll come up with other ones, and we'll move that. In fact, failure is an inherent part of creativity. Dying on your arse, I think, is a really important stage of creativity that we kind of we protect ourselves from, and we kind of don't really get opportunity to do it enough at the moment, again because we
mm.
don't go out to audiences early enough in the industry at the moment. So yeah, so it's kind of two sides of the same coin is, don't be afraid of failure, just go with your gut, and whatever happens happens.
Mm. My sort of the second last question for you, and I really liked your lessons. I think there's some great stuff there. Is like, how can we sort of convince commissioners or the established industry to adopt some of the things we talked about tonight? Is there a way, how can you, because you kind of are, you're speaking to these people, you're zooming
Mhm.
them, you're emailing them and stuff, so you probably have a bit more of a knowledge on this than me, but how can we change their mind? How can we convince them that to look out of the Stockholm syndrome and to look out of the system we're in?
I think we basically have to put not even so much our money where our mouth is, but ourselves where our mouths are. That doesn't make sense, but I think you know what I mean. Yeah, we need to show them. So one thing, and as I said at the very beginning of all of this, that I have found really, really exciting is actually how receptive the industry that I've spoken to so far, and I have been a little bit careful about who I've spoken to because there are some people that I know are just going to be resistant. And I'm like, that's fine. You can come and catch up once we're established. But I think this is the time to do this. I think even trying to do this a couple of years ago, people were still feeling like it was working, but I do think there is enough of a feeling like something has to change that they're much more receptive to the solution than I would have even thought. So that's a really positive thing. But other than that, I mean, it's really exactly what I'm saying about any type of creativity. You have to get it on its feet and you have to show them. I think that I can talk people into this new way of working and they'll go, okay, brilliant, fantastic. And they'll get very excited when they're speaking to me and then they'll go away and they'll think about all the negatives. So that's really what the festival is all about is because I could tell people my solution and I could maybe even do one or two projects. But this festival is about launching a whole new way of doing things in a really high profile, impactful sort of way that they won't be able to ignore. That's really the object of the festival more than I'd love to get commissions for a couple of the projects that I really, really believe in. I think we definitely will get that kind of attention. I think it's going to be a great thing just for audiences, for the people of Glasgow. I think it's going to be really, really good fun, and it's going to get loads of people like connecting community. I think telly is all about community, people talking about stories and bonding over stories, and I think that's really what's going to happen over that weekend. So there's loads of exciting things that are going to happen with the festival, but most importantly, in some ways, it's that the industry is not going to be able to ignore it. That's what it's all about, and I think that's probably the only way that's going to make them sit up and take notice.
Mm. No, it's exciting and it's no, it's good to also think positively as well. And again, just to reiterate, a lot of what we're talking about tonight, we are not blaming the existing industry and the people in it. Most
Mm.
everyone, as you said, they want to do a good job. They're trying to keep their jobs. They're trying to work.
Mm-hmm.
They love what they do. It's hard when you're in fight and flight as well to like look outside and
Mm-hmm.
stop and look around what you're doing.
Exactly.
So.
And it's hard when you're on the inside. Like, I think, this is kind of what I mean, but I've got a quite unique perspective on it because I've been sort of around the edges of the industry for such a long time. I've never really been deeply in it in some ways. I've kind of dipped my toe in it and then got chucked out again. And then
Mm,
because I was away, being an author for 7 years, I've kind of got this sort of perspective. I've got a sort of an outsider's perspective, which I think is quite important and is quite crucial to this. Because if I was going to work in the BBC every single day, I don't think I'd be thinking, or I'd be quietly maybe to myself thinking along these lines, but I wouldn't, because you don't step out of what's working for, if
mm,
something's working for you on a day-to-day basis, you're not thinking. So yeah, no, it's not about blaming any individuals. If I had their jobs, I would do their jobs too, more than likely. Um, Maybe not. I don't. Yeah, no, I think I would probably, or I'd do a version of them at least. That's why I think it's really important to get sort of fresh perspectives in, and I do think that people will be a lot more receptive, as I say, they already are, but even more so once we kind of show them the potential and the perspectives and just the untapped talent. We've all heard 1,000 times that Scotland is just too small a talent pool. That's why we have to. I mean, have you ever looked at the credits of pretty much every Glasgow series from how many Scottish writers, how many Scottish directors? Maybe one or two here or there. And the reason that they give us again and again is that there's just not enough of a talent pool because there's literally not enough people. And I'm always a bit like, okay, but how many like world famous bands have we got from Scotland, or how many world famous Canadians or actors? Why would we have this like sort of hole, I guess, in talent? And we don't. We're not tapping into the potential of the talent that there is in
mm.
Scotland. And that's, I mean, it's a kind of, that's a whole other aspect of the festival. The two things very much sort of go together for me. The system is broken, the system needs to be fixed. And also the system is really failing Scottish talent in particular, which is hugely untapped, and audiences who are not getting to see these incredible stories that, but they will.
Yeah.
They will in May.
Not getting to see enough of ourselves represented on screen either. And like, yeah, no, completely. And again, we talked about the Scotland thing so much in this podcast, so it's important to mention
Mm.
it. As I say, it's always really hard to cover everything in the episode. I know, but I think it's brilliant, and I think we do need to tell those stories and stuff as well. Final question: we always ask the closing question on the show is just, but what would your advice be to anyone that wants to sort of get into the creative industry, that wants to get into telly, like, thinking about yourself 20 odd years ago, like at the start, like what advice would you give to people now that are starting out?
So I guess so. Two bits of advice. I think the first one would be something that was told to me at drama school, which is if you can think of anything else that you could possibly do with your life, do that. And it's only when you're absolutely stuck with this, because because even if we fix it, it's still going to be rubbish. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm,
that's just the nature of creativity. It drives you bonkers. Nobody is completely happy when they're a creative. In fact, I used to worry, like, see, when I went to therapy when I was in my late 30s, I remember saying, see, if I get too happy, I'm not going to be able to write anymore. So like, I think there's always a bit of like angst and frustration. And even once we have fixed the industry in the way that I know we will, um, not everyone's going to get a fair shot, because that's just the nature of life. So yeah, so unless you're absolutely addicted to being a creative and to being a screen creative, go and do literally anything else. But if you are, and if you are one of us, firstly, I'm so, so sorry. And secondly, I'm also going to echo a piece of advice that I believe George Lucas said, which is somehow, if you have this in you, then somehow, whether it's you get involved in something like the Glasgow TV Festival, or you find somebody else doing something equally bonkers that suits you better, just keep doing it. Don't take no for an answer. Get onto YouTube and film, get an actor pal and just get things happening, get things on their feet, get active things, try things out in front of audiences, have them go, that's rubbish, I don't get it, and then think, oh, well, what's rubbish about it? Oh, I know, I could have done it like this and I could have done like that. Get active, get doing things, and yeah, just kind of make it happen.
Right. Well, Claire, thank you very, very much for your time tonight. Glasgow Film Festival is running from 29th of May to the 1st of June. Links and all that in the show notes. Really exciting and really lovely to chat to you about ways we can change the industry and get some optimism as well. Because a lot of the episodes we've done on this are vitally important, but they are bleak and it is a bleak time. But I think it's important to try and have
Mm-hmm.
some hope amongst all that as well. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you for everything you're doing and good luck with the festival.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me.